All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 9th, 2023 meeting of the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee, FSCAC. My name is Michelle White, and I'm the Designated Federal Officer, or DFO, for this advisory committee. I would like to thank all of our attendees and stakeholders for joining us today, including those of you who are providing public comment. Public comments submitted via the FSCAC public comment form by last Wednesday, November 1st, 2023, have been provided to the committee members. Before we start, there are a few things that you should know. This meeting is being recorded via Zoom. As you may know, this advisory committee is statutorily required under the James M. Inhofe National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023, and is formally established under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FSCA, as of our charter's official filing date of February 28th, 2023. This committee is considered a federal advisory committee and is governed by the requirements under FSCA. My role as the DFO is to manage the day-to-day administrative operations of the committee, attend all committee meetings, and ensure the committee operates in compliance with FSCA. The duties of this committee include providing advice, recommendations to the GSA Administrator, the FedRAMP Board, and agencies on technical, financial, programmatic, and operational matters regarding the secure adoption of cloud computing products and services. The majority of the work of this committee will be focused around the FedRAMP Authorization Act of 2022 statutory requirements and purpose. Specifically, we will be examining operations of FedRAMP and determining ways the authorization processes can be continuously improved, collecting information and feedback on agency compliance with and implementation of FedRAMP requirements, and serving as a forum that facilitates communication and collaboration among FedRAMP stakeholder community. Lastly, I want to note that attendance has been reviewed and we do have a quorum established. I will now go through a roll call for all council members. Please let me know if you are present by stating here. Ann Lewis.
Here.
Daniel Payne.
Here.
Michael Villacerca. Ravi Yeganathan. John Greenstein.
Present.
Jim Beckner.
Here.
Marcy Womack.
Here.
Bronco Boken.
Present.
Matt Scholl. Bo Burles.
Here.
Lamont Yarborough. Noman Ansari.
Here.
Jackie Snelfer.
Here.
Bill Hunt.
Here.
And Joshua Cohen.
Here.
Thank you all. I will now review the agenda for everyone's awareness of the time allotments for today. At 1 o'clock, we will have our call to order. And at 1:05, we're going to review our draft deliverable. At 1:25, we will hold public comments, and that will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. 1:40, we'll have a committee discussion, a working session on the content of the deliverable. And then at 2:45, we will be approving the deliverable and holding a vote. And then 2:55, we'll have our closing remarks and adjourn. Thank you again for attending this important meeting. Just a few more housekeeping items before we get started. We have a lot of discussion scheduled for today. If you have a question during the discussion, please raise your hand using the button on your Zoom platform. I will call on you based on your position in the queue. I ask that members identify themselves before speaking, so that those listening via webcast or reading the minutes later will know who made which comment. And please make sure that your microphone is muted anytime you are not speaking. To our open forum speakers today, please note a timer will be displayed on the screen indicating your time remaining, and an alert will indicate you're out of time. We are on a tight schedule today, so please be respectful of the time. There will be an open public comment period this afternoon with 3 minutes allowed for each speaker. We will be interrupting and, if needed, muting speakers who exceed 3 minutes to allow for more people to speak. So please speak succinctly, and please be respectful of the time. If you are not a committee member, please hold all questions and comments until this time. Again, all public comments submitted by last Wednesday were presented to the committee members prior to the meeting. If you are not called on to provide public comment today and have not already done so, we welcome you to submit your comments using our form at our website, www.gsa.gov/FSCAC. We will now jump directly into our agenda's first topic today. We'll be reviewing the current draft of the memo. This committee will be sending the GSA Administrator. Please note that the purpose of this initial part of our agenda is to look at the structure of the memo, and we will be holding a discussion later later in this meeting to discuss the actual content. And as the committee chair, I would like to invite you to lead this committee in the initial review of the deliverable. I will be happy to answer any FSCA related questions should they come up.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. It's Ann Lewis from GSA. Our ultimate outcome today is to have a final recommendation memo to deliver to the GSA Administrator. This initial draft was shared with you prior to the meeting today, and I know all of you have come prepared with proposed summaries of each section of this draft memo based on the structure that we've been using and thought about what are the top 3 most impactful recommendations for each section. Thank you all for participating in the last 3 weeks of very rich conversations about each section. And please keep in mind as we narrow these recommendations down to top 3 that we want the initial pass of recommendations to the administrator to be actionable, to be feasible, and to have maximum impact. We've reviewed this memo and took a first pass at synthesizing and organizing the content here so that we can use it as a starting point to solicit input from members to refine. And for transparency, our approach was to take a look at all of the ideas listed in the recommendation sections for all of the past 3 meetings, combine any similar statements or ideas to reduce duplicate content and try to make the recommendations more concise. In general, we tried to avoid removing any content, but we may have rearranged or moved things around into sections so that it could be more scannable and have related ideas next to each other. And we've updated some language to ensure consistency across the body of recommendations. For example, reframing goals to begin with verbs in a similar tense, etc. So since we have a limited amount of time today to complete this deliverable, we believe that starting with a consolidated version will help streamline today's process and achieve today's outcome. This version has been edited for grammar, reducing duplication and readability. So before we get started, I'd like to provide an overview of our process today. So first, we're going to take a look at this deliverable draft together and confirm that the sections that are included here are the ones that we believe are most important to include and the necessary context for the administrator. So we're going to take a look at the sections together and open up for feedback if anybody has any suggestions. Then we're going to review each section for each priority and provide space for committee members to offer any suggested changes or edits to what's been captured. So the goal for this edit pass here is that we are collaboratively editing the final memo together and suggest edits that will help clarify what's been written. This is not an opportunity to add new things. We will have more opportunities in the future to continue to discuss and provide recommendations. But the goal right now is just to take a look at what we've generated and make sure that it has everything that we intended in it and clarify each section. The goals for the memo to be concise, actionable, and includes the right amount of detail. We will spend about 20 minutes per each priority area. And finally, when we've completed our revisions to the content, each committee member will vote on their top 3 or 5 recommendations to be included in the final deliverable. So as you're looking through all of the recommendations we created together, think about what your votes are going to go towards, and then we will collect up all of those votes and put them into the draft that will be screen shared here so that everyone can see where we are. And then we'll be driving through a final voting process once we get into the working session today of today's meeting. So I hope that was clear. But before we move on, please raise any questions about the process that you may have. Bronco.
Okay, thank you, Bronco from CISA. I just wanted to confirm, so today at the end of the meeting, we are voting to approve the final draft that goes to the administrator.
That's right. Yeah. So we're going to look at the draft together. It's going to be screen shared. We're going to provide any feedback if anybody has it on sections and ordering, and then substance of each section. And then we will look at the long list of recommendations for each of the 3 sections. We'll vote on what we believe are in the authorization section top 5 and Conmon and automation top 3, consolidate all those votes together. And then we'll look at a final list and do a final round of voting where, like in our first meeting, we did a process where one person has to nominate that a thing be included in the final list. Another person has to confirm as sort of like a final round of voting.
Okay, can we ask for extension on that final vote? Because again, I do need to run this by my agency and I cannot vote without having it reviewed first, the final version.
I will bump that to Michelle.
As a matter of the FSCAC rules, we can change the agenda to have a vote at a future meeting. That is perfectly allowable, if that is what the committee would like to do.
Again, that will be my request for the committee for that final vote only. I'm very happy to go through the rest of the process. And thank you.
Thanks. We will capture that request and get back to everyone after this meeting on what that means for next steps. Any other questions? All right, let's dive in and, feel free to raise your hand through the
Actually,
process.
this is John Greenside from Bluescape. I do have one question. Didn't get my hand raised in time.
Sure, John.
So my question is, we're going to make this recommendation, and I'm supportive of not doing the final vote today, and doing it maybe in a subsequent meeting. And then I'm just looking ahead, keeping the end in mind. Are we going to, when we pick up our meetings again in 2024, the next round of meetings, choose additional topics to make recommendations on as part of the FSCAC? We're going to go through that process again of nominating issues and seconding and voting.
I believe so. We also have a few additional topics that have been teed up. Michelle, can you tell us more about what to expect for the next round of meetings in the new year?
Sure. We likely have been identified in the artificial intelligence executive order as supporting the GSA Administrator in looking at a process that FedRAMP is currently developing. So that is likely going to be one of the first meetings that we'll hold in the new year. Other than that, we have limitations on what we'll look at. They're going to be around, FedRAMP, process improvement, compliance, agency compliance with the FedRAMP. So anything in that area that the committee would like to review is wholly within the scope of what this committee will handle.
So we've got the AI conversation that's coming up that's already planned, but then after that, the request is, can we do another round of voting on, here's what our focus areas are going to be for the next quarter. We can do that, right? I think that's the request.
Yes, of course. Yes, we can continue on and identify more things that we want to look at, to learn more about, make recommendations on process improvement. Any of that area is wholly within scope of what this committee can do.
Great. So John, let's see. Yes.
So again, and where I was going with the question, just so I can get it out there, we can move on. So again, John Greenside, Bluescape, small business representative. And we'll vote on these recommendations of the topics that we've been discussing for the last 3 meetings. When we voted on these topics, we chose them. Certainly, I had hoped that the committee would address some of the requirements related specifically to small business, and making it more attractive for small businesses to participate in the FedRAMP program. Again, one of the stated objectives of this committee that Brian Conrad laid out even on the introductory call when we had our first call back in the spring. And the reason why I want to relate that to a process, because the question here is a process one. Although I'm moving toward, and we'll see how this final deliverable airs out, and I'm looking forward to approving it, because I think all of the recommendations have been discussing make perfect sense. There are some, potentially more negative impacts on small businesses, right? When we make some requirements with, for example, the need to invest in OSCAL tools or however that goes. I would really like, as a process item, to make sure that we loop back around after we make this final recommendation, this document that we're talking about today, to really drill into what are the second order effects of some of the recommendations we're making, especially on companies like myself. So that's it. Just wanted to get it out there. I don't want to hold up what we're doing. I understand. I just want to see if looping back around to this can be something we add to the agenda in a subsequent meeting.
Thanks for your perspective, John. And yes, absolutely. And we hope that the consideration section of each parts of the memo that we're going to look at here will also include some of that context about the impact to small businesses that's come up in the discussions over the last couple of weeks. So yes, absolutely, to this being important and officially on the agenda, and hopefully has been a part of the process thus far and will continue to be in the future.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions before we move forward? All right, let's dig into the draft memo. So could someone please share the draft memo? All right, so what we're going to do here is just skim the structure together. There are 3 sections, one for each of the topics that we've talked about for over the last 3 weeks. Authorization, ConMon, automation. And first, we're going to ask for feedback on sections and structure here. And then we're going to drill down into the language within each section, and then we're going to dive into recommendations. So I will hand it over to, I'm sorry, Michelle, who's facilitating the feedback for this part?
I can facilitate the feedback for this part. Basically, what we will do is we'll scroll through and take a look at the structure of the memo to make sure that the information captured here is reflective of what you as a committee intended with this. What we did make some changes to this. You'll get another chance since we are not going to be doing a final vote today. You'll get another chance to do an individual review when we send out the version at the end of this meeting. Branko, you do have a question?
Just a request. Can the person sharing the screen please zoom in? Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Branko. Is that sufficient for everyone to be able to read it?
Looks great on my side. Thank you.
All right, awesome. So we have modified the language to make it more readable. As Ann discussed, we did change some of the verbiage to make them more actionable items. So let's go through and start with the background. This is really just a background about the FSCAC as a whole and what we have been charged to do. And the 3 topics that we have identified as our first areas that we're going to provide feedback to the GSA Administrator. Do we have any comments in this area of the memo that we should address? Oh, please go ahead.
In the first paragraph, the last sentence, the majority of the work of this committee, and then goes on to enumerate the sub bullets therein. Are there other responsibilities or work that is not encapsulated within the background? In
This
other
like-
words, the majority fundamental and necessary, or is it really that the work of this committee will be focused around the FedRAMP authorization?
There is flexibility because the FSCAC has the ability to provide feedback to federal agencies on cloud
Okay.
services outside of the FedRAMP program. So yes, we are not wholly limited to FedRAMP.
So just as a recommendation, it might be worthwhile to kind of button that up just as a consideration, not a hard recommendation.
Great, thanks, Bo. Any other comments on this area of the memo?
Yeah, this is Mari Spina from MITRE Cyber. I'm just a little bit concerned about the 3 bullets at the bottom, and that the scope is potentially too narrow.
So, Mari, if you're not an FSCAC member, if you could hold your comments to the public feedback area.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem. But we will have time for public comments that you can address, but just an FYI, these are just the top 3 this committee decided to work on first. I don't think that there is I don't think that there is anything that weights these specific 3 initiatives as more important than others.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not a record of all the things we're going to do. This is a record of the last 6 weeks of work. We're just trying to document it and consolidate and summarize it so we can submit it and get on to the next iteration of work.
Yeah, roger that. Thank you.
All right, if there are no more comments on this area, we'll go ahead and scroll down to the next section. So this is the CSP authorization improvements. As you can note, we did create kind of a combined problem statement. So I would invite the committee members to be able to take a look at the problem statement and the goals, and we'll scroll down for the considerations later. But I do want to make sure that what we had captured previously has not been changed by this adjustment in the language. I'll give you a few minutes to read through that, and then we'll query the committee members to see if they would like changes.
Jump in, Marcy.
Thank you. One thing I feel like is not encapsulated here is that there are inconsistencies in the process, which like leads to quality issues and leads to some of these other items that we're capturing. I don't know if that's an appropriate comment to make here, just to make sure I'm on the right track, but I wanted to note that.
And
Makes
now,
sense. And
Oh,
Cliff,
you
you can add to the end of identify the root cause of why there are quality concerns, including potential issues with consistency. Marcy, would that cover it?
Absolutely. Thank you.
and Bo, you have a change that you'd like?
I think the problem statement, speaks to the manual nature of the work, the costly impact on CSPs, the time correspondence, and then the associated scaling and limitation and the broader growth. But what it doesn't do around the authorization is really talk about the disparity between agency and FedRAMP JAB authorizations, and 2, some of the challenges that we've talked about, particularly around inconsistencies around the FedRAMP customer responsibilities, particularly associated with SaaS-based solutions. Those are really fundamental to effectively ensure secure outcomes for federal customer agencies. So it seems to be missing just those two components.
All right, great. Thanks, Bo. Bronco.
I will start by apologizing again, Bronco from CISA. I will have to apologize to everyone. I may sound like a broken record, but I will be I'm already repeating myself and will be repeating myself. We should not forget that FSCAC stands for Federal Secure Cloud. So security is our primary goal, and that needs to be captured in the problem statement. So it's not about the cost and manual intensive. These are all great things, but ultimately it is what affects the security of federal cloud offerings, and that needs to be captured somewhere.
So if we updated it to be the authorization process, which is focused on security, is manual intensive, blah, blah, blah. Would that, do you think, bring the proper focus? If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Sorry, no, I was just reading and thinking which is focus or which primary goal is. I think it's good for now. Maybe we can tweak it later. I don't want to waste too much time.
Okay. So can you put a note there that we should finish that update?
We should just make sure that we capture that all these ultimately impact the security of federal cloud offerings or cloud offerings used by federal agencies.
Makes sense. Thanks.
All right, great. Any other comments on the problem statement or goals area for CSP authorizations? Bill.
Am I just being pedantic here, but manual intensive doesn't sound right to me.
Manually.
Yeah, it needs to be manually or requires lots of manual labor, but it's an adjective in this context. Sorry, pedantic, but I've just been staring at it for the last couple of minutes. It's driving me nuts.
Fair enough.
Bill, you said what I was thinking.
I thought there was a comma missing between the two words, but you're right.
Yeah, sorry. I'm always going to be the pedantic one. I apologize.
Well, you're all security professionals, so that makes sense. All right, Jackie.
I'm going to be the pedantic one probably now. So the authorization process doesn't impact the security of the offerings. It is to illuminate for risk decisions the security of federal cloud offerings. The authorization process itself does not impact the security.
That sounds like a really rich discussion that could, I think, get adjudicated over many minutes. Can we agree to table that and follow up?
Sure.
Okay.
Fantastic. Any other comments in these two areas? Bo?
I would love to see the goals effectively, included there to really reflect or require a secure configuration profile, maybe as an add-on or to the actual CRM to ensure secure configuration deployments.
Does that affect the authorization though?
So I agree with Bo. I'm not sure that's the goal or that should be a recommendation to include security configuration deployments or profiles or baselines.
Yeah, is that a part of the what or a part of the how? This section should be for what, and for like the outcomes we're driving towards, not how we get there.
Probably the how. I think it should be a recommendation.
Okay.
The goal should be
I
to
would agree.
improve security of those offerings by defining baselines or by creating baselines.
I think that makes sense. So, Anne, we can just move it from the goals section and, when we're kind of breaking it out into the recommendations, perhaps therein enumerated.
Okay. Cliff or Teresa, can I ask that you move this down? All right, are we more or less okay with problem statement and goals?
Jackie
This
has
is-
a comment.
Yeah, this is Jackie. And I was just going to say a couple of people said this, and it's not in our goal statement, which is that all of these improvements should be focused on improving the security of the cloud offerings.
Agree. That should be the #1 goal.
Thanks. Yep, North Star. All right, any final thoughts? Okay, let's move on to reading and collaboratively editing the consideration section. Oh,
I think we should add a bullet here, really to reflect or really validate exactly what requires FedRAMP authorization as a consideration point.
makes sense.
Cloud does not equal FedRAMP.
Right.
Is that something that, this is Marcy with Shulman, is that something that GSA would determine? Like who has that action? Is that the draft policy memo, or the draft memo? Like, I want to understand where that action sits, because I think that's important.
Really both.
Okay.
Because scoping is in context of the FedRAMP policy document. But I think this group has an opportunity to give voice to ensure that we're really focusing on the right things and not simply going through and requiring the FedRAMP for cloud hosted applications that are very separate and distinct from, multi-tenant, single tenant type offerings that are intended as a service.
And again, to clarify, OMB has that authority because of the FedRAMP memo. GSA can make recommendations to OMB on how that should be done. And since we do have a new draft FedRAMP memo out there, and that might also be a good topic for conversation for next week.
So I think this committee can give voice the scope.
Concur.
Yep, it's a great point. Any other considerations or edits to existing considerations here?
All right, fantastic. Let's go ahead and move down to the recommendations then.
Any comments or edits to recommendations A through J, noting that the letters go down to X here, so we've got a couple of rounds to get through. Marcy.
Yes, thank you. I was going to note that maybe F is nested under A. If there are like quality and like communications and identification, maybe those can be lumped together for simplicity.
Oh, good call. Thanks. Yeah, let's nest that under A. Bo, was your hand up for this or for previous comments?
You know, I'm just for this, I was just going to make a comment on the sheer number of alphabet letters here, going all the way down, and that there is a potential affinity across some of these individualized recommendations where they can be grouped into higher level recommendations. I mean, if we're trying to essentially limit this to 3 to 5, I think we might want to talk about some process on how to get to that 3 to 5. What's the
Good
thinking?
point. I mean, our current thought is everybody looks at all the different items, identifies their individual top 3 to 5. Everyone's going to paste the letters for each of those into the chat. We'll consolidate them and then show what the consolidated cumulative votes are. But if you want to recommend making some of these more granular right now or doing more grouping, we can certainly do that. Sorry, less granular. Can also take a little bit of time to think about it. If folks are ready to move on to the next section, any objections before we scroll down? Jim.
Excuse me. I would, at the the goal of trying to consolidate a bit, option D, and Delta could probably go under A as well, I would think.
Sounds good. Jackie?
In the draft that you sent out, this appears to be different. And in the draft, we had 5 high-level groupings. Did this change between versions?
Michelle, can you speak to that?
Sure, yes. We did change it between versions. What we ended up doing is we rewrote these recommendations as actionable. So we used a verb to start each of the sentences. So yes, we did lose some of the groupings, but we had originally grouped in light things with light things. We can easily do that and send out the version of what we would like to do. But the intent was not to change the actual meaning of the statements.
Yeah, I guess where I was going, Michelle, thank you for that, is that before we had 5 really high level groupings and we were trying to figure out how to group these into meaningful high level statements with, specific actionable items potentially under those high level groupings. And I was just commenting on the fact that they were originally in high level groupings. So I like the actionable language of these. I just didn't know if that was a place to start with the grouping.
Better, folks. Any comments on that? We had 5 groupings. Now we have a big list.
Yes, I mean, we can potentially send out another version of this with groupings, but that still will not reduce the number of recommendations that we will have in this memo.
Jackie and then Bo.
Jackie Stoffer. And so this is one of the things I struggle with. So this is a document going to the GSA Administrator, right? Overseeing this. These are some very, very detailed recommendations that we've really thought through based on our perspective. it's really hard to to essentially give you your top 3 recommendations. I mean, what I will call big rocks, right? And so how do we translate or provide these, what I will call very actionable items that, you know, aren't these big rocks? How do we get that information into FedRAMP for their consideration if we're going to boil down these actionable things to just 3 to 5 recommendations? Over.
So we're not generating a 12-month comprehensive roadmap for the FedRAMP team. FedRAMP team does have a roadmap, and many of these things are already on the roadmap, but what we're trying to do is narrow in on what do we think is the highest impact things to focus on first from this group's perspective. So it's less about worrying about whether anything will fall off the list. There's a lot of work that we need to do with FedRAMP. Everybody acknowledges that. And there's a lot of great feedback here. The question is, what's most important to prioritize first is how I'm thinking about it. Jackie, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Right, Bo, and then I think I saw Marcy go off mute.
And my concern is somewhat similar to Jackie's. Can you just clarify whether the top 5 recommendations voted would be the only recommendations moving forth, or whether the administrator would effectively see both, as well as the FedRAMP PMO, what was recommended, and then other recommendations that did not go forth?
You know, we can present a consolidated memo with top prioritized recommendations. And Michelle, would it be possible for us to also include as an appendix the complete set of recommendations?
Yes, of course. We have the ability to basically do what we think is most appropriate for the GSA administrator. I don't think that if the concerns that I'm hearing are that these are too granular for the GSA administrator, the original groupings we had were not actionable. So we are trying to find recommendations that is something that can be completed by the FedRAMP.
I think that anxiety is not that these aren't actionable. It's just that there are a lot of great ideas here, and we don't want to pick just 3 or just 5. I think I'm hearing from the group here that all the ideas are valid. So we can choose to present the complete list, and then the administrator will make some choice and send the memo and also her commentary to the FedRAMP team. And then the FedRAMP team will, like any implementation or PMO team, have to prioritize. So we can choose as this group to give them a full set of, here are all the things we've thought about, make your best guess on what should go first, or we can additionally prioritize, or we can just prioritize. So we're open to feedback here. We can give this entire list, but if you were the team that was receiving this list, how would you know what to prioritize? Would you want to see guidance on that? Just going to ask the group to think about that.
Yeah. And if I may, what I was thinking when I look at this is that, I think this group effectively looked at, the broad set of challenges corresponding to the authorization process. And a lot of the recommendations, they cross a bunch of varying affinity groups, everything from the review process, review scope, the vendor engagement, finding sponsors and things of that nature. And just trying to go through and pick 2, 3, 4, 5 recommendations across a number of somewhat disconnected aspects of the authorization process in a certain way tends to water down the overall effect of the recommendations, in my view. So if I was consuming this, I would probably want to go through and make sure that there was a fuller view into the broader thinking of the committee, and then certainly prioritize a set of the recommendations across some of the individual, swim lanes, if you will, corresponded to the FedRAMP authorization process, just as a thought.
It's great perspective. And if everybody in this meeting believes we don't want to prioritize, we want to give the full list of recommendations, and maybe we just want to consolidate or explain more, we can do that. That's our choice. So no need to feel anxiety about prioritization leading us down the wrong path here, we can choose collectively to not do that and provide the comprehensive list. Bill and then Jim.
Thanks, Bill Hunt, SEC. I wanted just to affirm the previous set of statements that were being made around. I think that as a committee, the best impact that we can potentially provide here is by retaining the high level recommendations and bring ourselves up a level from where we have been and kind of focused. And I say that because, you know, the program office probably has very, very good ideas about what they can do and how they can achieve it in the time frames provided, and we are not as close to the work as the people who are actually doing the work. So in some of these instances, like in item D, we're saying like host one thing and attend one thing. I think that level of detail is probably beyond the level that we should be considering as a committee. This is just my personal opinion. So I would recommend that we consider ways that we can bring this up a level so that it can be a little bit more actionable and provide more flexibility. And therefore it will be more impactful. My second recommendation here would be that we pull out recommendations that are beyond the scope of what we were immediately looking at here, and potentially bring those out to further working sessions that we're going to have in the future. This is not the last time that this committee is going to put forth recommendations, and specifically some of the ones that have been mentioned that might be more impactful, again, in next week's conversation regarding the FedRAMP memo itself. So potentially like things that people have brought up around what should or should not be concluded in the FedRAMP authorization, things like that. I think that is more valuable in the OMB engagement than necessarily this GSA engagement. So my two recommendations then to summarize are bring everything up to a higher level so that we have a more impactful series of recommendations, and two, pull things off of the table that are not immediately within the scope here and are more generalized.
Thanks, Bill. Jim?
Yeah, Jim, Beckner, T-Metrics. I agree with Bill. He took some of the words out of my mouth with his first recommendation there about that, you know, how deep we're getting into this. You know, we're basically an advisory committee, and as he said, you know, we are all very intimately familiar with the FedRAMP process, but you know, only the FedRAMP PMO and is just going to know, you know, what's possible and what you know, resources they have for and how exactly to accomplish a goal. So I agree. Any step we can take to try to, you know, instead of drilling down, let's pull these back a little bit and you know, get more you know, more generic, so to speak, of what the recommendation is, just so we're not you know, throwing too much and getting too much into the weeds with them.
All right, so I'm hearing a lot of recommendations for us to pull back up a level. And also we want to make sure our recommendations are actionable, which is why I believe there's some scoping details in the recommendations here. So there are a couple ways we could proceed here. One is we table this and everyone spends more time with this prioritized list that we can send out and we can continue to discuss in a future meeting, and that would delay the delivery of the memo to the administrator. We could spend this time right now trying to consolidate this long list into categories and then call those categories the pulled back up a level, higher level view of goals, or potentially something else. Do folks have recommendations on how they'd like to use the remainder of our time for this section? Bill?
All right, so everybody's being quiet. So I'll say, I think that we could potentially, in the time we have remaining, try and at least bring this up to a higher level of recommendation. Given that we do have the time, I'm just really loath to delaying and deliverables whenever possible.
Fair. Does anybody else have an opinion? I'd like to second Bill's idea. Got a +1 from Jim. All right, so we're only a third of the way through looking at the list here. Maybe as a next step, we can continue looking at the rest of the list, because I don't think everyone has seen the full list yet. And then after taking a look at each section, so we looked at A to H, I think. So if you could scroll down to I, Michelle, that would be great. Then we can talk about what are the categories that all these things should be lumped under. And attempt to just sort of recategorize and call that an edit pass. So I'll just give folks a few minutes to read here. Please put a thumbs up when you're done reading so we know when to proceed. Jim, is that a raised hand or a thumbs up?
Raised hand whenever
Yeah, go.
everyone's done.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to suggest reading through this, India and Kilo seem to be very similar. So if we're looking to other places to consolidate, I mean, it seems like we could probably combine those a bit.
Thanks. Can our note taker confirm they heard that suggestion, or should we repeat it? Jim, can you repeat that real quick?
Yeah, I'd suggest that item I, India, and item K is in Kilo. They could probably be combined. They seem to be very similar.
Great, thank you. All right, I saw 4 thumbs up from FSCAC members on reading. Anybody else need more time? All right, Michelle, can you please scroll down? Jackie.
Throughout, whether it's Kanban authorizations, through the whole process, we have a lot about OSCAL. It seems like that really should be a major recommendation on getting ahead of the coming automation with a lot of OSCAL type work that needs to be examined.
Proposing that as a category?
Yes.
Okay.
Alternatively, should that be just limited to the automation priority, and they kind of, reference each other?
Yeah,
Marcy, I agree. Yeah.
All right, so Cliff, can you move all the OSCAL things to the automation section, and we'll probably end up doing a categorization effort down there too. Bill?
I'm going to make explicit my ask here that I was hinting around for the last couple of recommendations. I think that if the program team, if we can establish a parking lot outside of this document somewhere for some of the things that we know that we want to cut from this, I think that'll help us all feel a little bit more comfortable about things that we're removing from this list. That would be my first proposal. My second proposal here is that and this is for the committee, for everybody here, I would recommend we pull everything out that's talking about changing the definition of FedRAMP, what it covers, what controls are required, all of those elements that are outside the purview of exactly what we're talking about today, and things that instead would be recommendations that need to go directly to OMB.
Okay, so the first request here was Cliff or Teresa, can you create a parking lot area down at the bottom of the dock for anything we kick off the list? And then Bill is suggesting kicking off the list, anything that has to do with the scope of OMB's authority. And Bill, can you articulate that again? Like, what's the threshold there for things that are OMB versus GSA's authority?
Sure. If you could scroll back up just for a second, I can give a couple of them that were jumping off the page to me. Okay. Let's see. O, review and establish FedRAMP control inheritance and control reviews with the newest government responsibility. There was another one in here I'm trying to find about looking at other standards that are international standards. Somewhere, sorry, I'm just trying to catch up to myself here. And then there was another one in here that was specifically about what is covered and what is not covered by FedRAMP. Item I, it looks like 2 different things got combined there under item I. The first sentence of that should be pulled, in my opinion, because that's under the OMB memo. That sentence, yeah, needs to be pulled because it's different from the second sentence. Those things are unrelated.
And we will have a later date where we discuss the OMB memo, which will be recommendations for things that OMB has explicit authority for.
Exactly my point.
Conversations, yeah.
Yeah. So those are a few of the ones that leapt off the page to me. There are probably more as we scroll back through here, but those are the first couple of things that leapt up.
Jackie?
Down under letter O, why was that struck? That's in FedRAMPs. It's FedRAMP control inheritance for other control reviews. So this would be like leveraging a PAS or an IAS to inform SAS and reducing the number of controls. It has a direct impact on authorization, and it's fully in the control of FedRAMP. I don't understand why that's being removed.
Sorry, I was proposing that would be under removal, because at the end of the day, that's really up to this OMB to help. I mean, yes, FedRAMP does the authorization and the review, but control inheritance explicitly, I think, is a thing that NIST would have to say, right?
No,
I think we're saying different things. Like Jackie,
Yes.
and just for clarity, Jackie, you're talking about like SAS inheriting from PAS and IAS and that type of thing, right? But when I read this, I hear or I read like other frameworks. So maybe it's a terminology and clarification that needs to be had.
I think there was another one in here about other frameworks aside from O.
Okay, maybe I'm merging those mentally.
That's letter N, I think.
I would concur that N also does not belong here based on that.
Just
Oh,
And just to be clear, NIST does not effectively preclude, nor does FedRAMP already, the ability to effectively leverage controls and control assessments from other frameworks. Now, I think the discussion previously was wholesale in lieu of, particularly around lower risk SAS. In the case of, ISO, SOC 1, SOC 2, PCI, things of that nature for certain classes of SAS solutions that could potentially be considered in lieu of a traditional FedRAMP authorization. So I think we are talking two different things. The latter, I think, is more of a FedRAMP is really more of an OMB decision. But the former is certain is something that is presently allowed.
all right. So then I think we add to the parking lot of OMB authority things. If I'm getting this right, Bo, control inheritance in lieu of formal. Wait, sorry. No, I think I missed it. Can you restate that?
Yeah, we're talking about control inheritance from other authorization regimes or assessment regimes, really. And typically speaking, when we're talking about inheritance, we're really talking about leveraging assessment data from other control regimes versus leveraging other authorization regimes outright. The latter being an OMB policy call, the former really being something that is allowed under current FedRAMP policy, i.e. to leverage current assessment data from another assessment type.
So control inheritance from one FedRAMP assessment to another that may be a different type of software that shares things in common based on the kind of service it is, that's on this list. And control inheritance from external to FedRAMP frameworks is under the OMB section or the parking lot.
Sorry, I think, Teresa, you're doing the opposite right now. I think I think that we set that for what Bo was saying and Jackie was saying, if I'm interpreting everybody correctly here. And then N, I guess, and potentially P get moved to the parking lot. Is that what we were just saying, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think N for sure. We're talking if it's from other security programs. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask us to focus on putting these items into categories. So we'd started the process of making categories up at the top here. And the first category I think we've implicitly started on is FedRAMP ways that the FedRAMP PMO can track types and details of quality issues and security packages. Are there any other items in the list here that seem like they should be pushed up under this category? Michelle, does the group here have access to the full list without us screen sharing it? Or is that something we can make happen so that we can do the categorization here together?
Unfortunately, there is not a platform that everyone has access to because of issues with getting access to Google and such as that. So what we are planning to do is to send out a version at the end of this meeting, and we can take individual comment and create a combined document with everyone's comments incorporated and have that as an option for review for our next meeting. And we can send out that revised version with the individual feedback. I'm expecting that we'll probably look for a meeting to finalize this in likely in December.
Okay, so I think I heard that the proposal was we should pause here, send what we have out to the group. Everyone can suggest consolidation suggestions. We put them together and then we reconvene.
Yes, we do still have to hold our public feedback. We do definitely want to hear from our public members before we do in the meeting. But I think unless there are objections, it may be a good idea to asynchronously review this and then collect individual feedback and then combine the document to share with everyone again.
Okay, so you're saying we're going to pause this, we're going to do public comment and circle back to the other two sections? Or do those asynchronously as well?
We should probably do the other two sections. I think they may be a little more simplistic to do, but we could take a look at those to make sure at least some of the areas are appropriate, like the problem statement and things like that. Maybe not the recommendations, if that is an area that becomes conducive to lots of discussion.
Well, discussion is good and that's what we're here for, but it's just a matter of how do we make sure that everyone can do it. And it seems like having access to this document before discussing is an important step. So I agree. Let's go through the other two sections and then and see what suggestions we can collect up here, but then make sure that everyone has access to and is looking at the same thing before our next meeting on this.
Fantastic. So common process improvements. We did create a problem statement and summarize the goals listed here on the sheet. If everyone could take a moment and review those and to identify any changes that you'd like in those areas. And Bo, you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I think the problem statement, again, lacks that in some cases, Conmon is really only be done at the JAB level and not at the FedRAMP agency level. And you have inconsistent, outcomes based on continuous monitoring, given the bifurcated nature of the FedRAMP versus agency authorization flows.
Great, thanks. Marcy?
Yeah, I just want to counter that briefly. Conmon is a nebulous term, mostly because If we're talking about monthly ConMon, then sure, but like on an annual basis, there is the annual assessment, and with that comes a continued recommendation for authorization and a continued authorization, both by the agency and FedRAMP. So I don't want that to get lost, or maybe it needs to be differentiated here.
Yeah, I fully support what Marcy just said. So it's not properly defined, needs to be captured in the problem statement, and probably needs to be captured under considerations as well.
I don't
So-
have direct feedback on like how to actually execute that within the structure of the document right now, but perhaps that's something that we can look at in the individual updates that we get a chance to make.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marcy. Any other comments on this area before we move on? Okay, if you could scroll down a little. Go down and just take a look at the considerations. Any comments on the considerations? Other than the definition of ConMon?
So I'm not sure that the introduction to this section is an introduction to the bulleted list below. Should that first sentence also be bullet number 1? If I remember correctly, it was Bo who recommended this, but I'm not sure, Bo, if this was intended to be just another bullet or an intro to the section.
I think that first bullet, Bronco, is just a statement from Ryan suggesting that, 80 cents out of every dollar we're really focused on, maintenance of existing FedRAMP authorizations. And what the opposite means is that 20 cents on the dollar are essentially going through to expand the authorization scope. And a lot of that, is endemic of some of the fundamental challenges corresponding to continuous monitoring, and that split needs to be more fair, I think.
Great, and I agree with that. I guess my question is that another bullet, or do
I think
you
go
feel that
either
the
way.
way it's, yeah, okay.
Great. Let's move down to the recommendations then. Have these revised versions of the recommendations captured what you were intending?
And this is the full list. There's only A through H.
Again, just a reminder, you will have individual feedback on this. We are just trying to capture anything that is screaming out at you that is incorrect at this point.
And point of clarification, so the 80-20 split, is it a fair assumption, maybe a clarification we could seek, the 20% to authorizations, I think that means initial authorization, so expansion of the marketplace, not maintaining the marketplace in like the current authorization. So again, understanding that ConMon does include an assessment component and a continuing authorization, I want to make sure that the metrics are accurately presented here.
And how confident are we that these are right numbers? Is this just an assumption? Is there anecdotal evidence? Do we have harder evidence to support this?
Jackie?
This is Jackie Snoffer. So that is from a TR supporting the JAB authorization as well as in our agency authorizations. This is really spot on for what we see from our budget and resourcing process.
Jackie, is
Okay,
that
I'm just thinking
80%?
maybe we should reference that, just state that it's based on experience or based on TR experience.
And is that 80% monthly conmon, like scan analysis essentially? Or does that include the annual assessment authorization?
It includes the monthly, all the change requests, and annual.
Okay, thank you.
And Bo, you had a comment?
Yeah, as a federal agency, again, just reflecting the CISO perspective here, consuming these FedRAMP authorizations. You know, I think we've talked about, or I've tried to harp on the point that the customer responsibilities are fundamental because they are what effectively derive, along with a secure configuration profile, which does not exist, a secure, you know, cloud deployment. And from a conmon standpoint, those CRMs, they do not keep pace with the rapid pace of cloud, you know, modernization, new services, and are really fundamental to ensuring secure outcomes. And one of the suggestions that we've made either in this one or another one was to see if there's an ability to effectively integrate along with the OSCAL/EGRC work, a means to be able to auto update and populate across GRCs via you know, a reference model of sorts that vendors can opt into for automatic update of customer responsibilities as new services get FedRAMP authorized or are brought into the FedRAMP authorization boundary. That's a lot. I mean, I can help you to kind of enumerate the verbiage there, but I think if we were to enumerate a recommendation here, I think that would be a missed opportunity not having that along with the OSCAL language.
All right, great. Thanks, Bo. Any other comments on the recommendations? All right, let's go and discuss trade-offs. Trade-offs are one of the areas that we did not get to in our working session, in our initial working sessions. So we are looking for some trade-offs for this particular area. Anyone have any suggestions for trade-offs that we should include here? Are there any cost impacts? Oh, go ahead, Marcy.
Thanks. I was just going to note on the trade-offs, I think those might be, not to continue to defer on this one, but it may be more apparent once we actually are kind of confirmed and aligned on the recommendations and the goals.
All right, thanks, Marcy. I can definitely include that in the individual feedback. If you do have some trade-offs, please also articulate those when you provide your individual feedback. And then we'll scroll down to the impact to the stakeholders to make sure that we don't need any changes here.
Looks like Bronco has his hand up.
Bronco, yes.
Yeah, so again, Bronco from CISA, going back to trade-offs, and I think some of them were captured under impacts to stakeholders. And I'm struggling to really fully understand the scope of trade-offs and what they apply. But an example would be potentially additional cost that automation may require, additional cost to both providers as well as FedRAMP versus benefits. And again, others feel free to question that and challenge that. I'm not sure if that accurately represents one of the trade-offs there.
Yeah, as I'm looking, I mean, to Marcy's point, until we know which ones we're proposing, trade-offs will be specific to each one of the recommendations, but all the recommendations here look like they're recommending we adopt or integrate or do some sort of work to adapt our processes. So there'll be startup costs for all of those, but ideally, like better quality and cost savings over the long term after that adoption cost. But so I think additional costs, in particular startup costs, is an important thing to note here.
Great. Any comments on the impact to stakeholders for this section? All right, fantastic. Let's go ahead and scroll down to the next section. And this is our automation initiatives. If you could please take a moment to review the problem statement and let me know when you are ready to discuss any issues or comments that you may have on this draft. Marcy.
One addition to the bulleted list of challenges that could be addressed, I think that one of the other issues we've identified previously is quality concerns. So I think that that might be partially alleviated with automation.
Great. Any other comments on the problem statement? All right, fantastic. Let's go down to the goals. We'll give everybody a chance to take a look at those, and please raise your hand if you have any changes or comments or additions to this list. Jackie.
You know, we've got complete the award of the contract as a goal for the GRC. And I think a modification, we talked about this last week, is that we need to look at the scope of the contract, and our automation initiatives need to be whole of federal government, not just the FedRAMP PMO. And so we need to evaluate, actionable. We need to evaluate the contract, but the goal really should be automation for a whole of government. So the agencies and their process, the CSOs, the three PAOs. But I think the goal really should be automation for whole of government. And to that end, the contract should be evaluated for that focus.
Great, thanks, Jackie. Bronco.
So once again, both the problem statement and goals is very compliance oriented and focused on compliance. And once again, we really need to stress the security. So again, number one goal needs to be, we need to capture somewhere in a statement that our goal is to enhance our ability to manage cyber, to manage risk to federal enterprise in cyber relevant time, or enhance. I guess that's an accurate statement. Enhance ability to manage risk to the federal enterprise in cyber relevant time.
Sorry, can you unpack that just a little bit more? I'm struggling to understand, because at the end of the day, I mean, the FedRAMP program does nothing to balance risks. It is pass fail. So what exactly, can you just unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. I guess we need to, but again, the whole idea of FedRAMP program is not compliance, right? The whole, and again, with FSCAC, the goal is what's in the name is security of cloud offerings. So we're doing all of this, reducing cost, automation, continuous monitoring. The ultimate goal is to improve security of those cloud offerings and ultimately reduce the risk to the federal enterprise.
I much more agree with the way that you said it that time. That one makes perfect sense to me. Okay.
So again, going back to this, so yeah, I definitely agree that it needs some massaging. So enhance the security of cloud offerings in order to enhance the security of cloud offerings. By introducing or enhance security of cloud offerings by allowing better management of risk. I'm thinking on the fly here. By allowing for better management of risk to this federal enterprise in cyber relevant time. I'm not a big fan of the whole risk management and the idea of the term risk. So if we can find a way to kill that and just say enhance security of cloud offerings.
Perhaps the focus could be on, again, the consistency aspect instead. Everything you just said, but I mean, again, if we're just looking for words to kind of flesh it out a little bit, I think it's less about the better management of risk personally, and I would say it's more about the consistency, because again, this is the automation piece, right? It's all about pass fail.
And again, if we assuming that we'll have an opportunity to provide additional comments or edits, I'm happy to work on this statement.
All right, great. Any other comments on the goals? All right, fantastic. Let's move on, Joan.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I didn't get my hand up fast enough. I would say that one of the goals. Never mind. No. I'm just being pedantic. Yep, go on. Carry on.
You can get it in the individual feedback. Considerations. Do have a few of these. So if you'd like to take a look at least the summary area in a few of these, and let us know if you have any comments that you'd like to make now. Franco?
Something is wrong with bullet number 2. It suggests that low risk controls need to be automated. I don't think that is our goal there.
Yeah, to rephrase, it would be to identify the low risk controls to determine if there's automation for those instead of requiring like manual assessment. I think this came up during the automation of assessment discussion.
Sorry, by low risk, are we explicitly saying those that are included in the low impact? Because again,
No.
there's no evaluation of risk. It's not up to the FedRAMP team to determine that one control is more important than another.
Yeah, fair point. Maybe there's a different term to use, but frankly, like SA2, whether InfoSec is considered in a CSP's budget, that's not something that we really should need to be wasting time on. That's kind of the whole point. At least when we were thinking of any ways to automate anything or lower level of effort, et cetera.
Yeah, again, I don't disagree with the principle. I just think that the problem is that FedRAMP has no authority to say that something is more inherently valuable than another thing. That's a NIST issue.
Well, they do. They define the baselines.
No, NIST defines the baseline.
No. FedRAMP defines the baselines. Because there are 323 controls in Rev 5 at moderate. For Rev 5 moderate, which is significantly higher than 853 Rev 5 moderate.
I thought that FedRAMP only picks the subset that they are able to actually assess versus the ones that agencies must assess. I thought that's how that broke down, but I could be wrong.
They actually, when they went to the Rev 5, they actually used the equivalent, so of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We call it DOD-CAR. I don't know what they call it on the federal side, but anyway, to look at the controls, the risk, the impact, and use that model to actually determine what the baseline was.
That would be GovCAR threat modeling.
Thank you.
Okay, this is interesting. I didn't realize that FedRAMP had updated to. I knew they had updated the Rev 5 controls. I didn't know that they had actually done use that for the evaluation purposes to say that one thing is more important than another. So again, I'm learning things every day.
So just to be clear, the evaluation of control has been done. I am not sure if those results are being used right now to prioritize controls. That will be a question for FedRAMP.
Anyone from the FedRAMP PMO prepared to answer that question, or should we take it back?
And we've made a note to take it back to the FedRAMP team, but I'm not sure that we have anyone on the call that would be able to answer that question. Any other comments on considerations before we move on to the rest of them? All right, if you could scroll down a little. Taylor, if you could please just scroll down a little so that we can, thank you, see the rest of those. All right, again, with the recommendations, we have some changes here. Please take a minute to look at this and let me know if there are any large areas that you would like to discuss today, or wait until individual feedback. But we'll give you a couple minutes to take a look at this, and then I'll let anyone speak who would like to.
Again, Bronco from CISA, I'm looking at D as in Delta, establish guidance for incorporating FedRAMP Conmon to existing solutions like CDM. We need something stronger. It's not just guidance. Recommendation is to escalate or accelerate ingestion of FedRAMP Conmon data to a solution like CISA CDM.
All right, great, thanks, Bronco. Any other comments on these?
Again, under the not just established guidance, we should remove established guidance. Accelerate should be the action verb there.
And Bill, you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry. While we're on that topic, I would say that this could be even broadened even further beyond just the Conmon data. I would love to see OSCAL stuff being able to be automatically absorbed into Archer/CSAM as well, and possibly shared across agencies that way. So just my personal vote for, we could just remove the word Conmon here potentially, and have this be even more powerful. Just my 2 cents.
Especially considering that we still need to define what Conmon is. That makes sense.
I agree.
All right, great. If there are no more comments, we can scroll down to trade-offs and review those really quick. And also the impact to the stakeholders. Give you a minute to look over those, and then we can discuss any changes that you would like to see. All right, any comment from anybody on the FSCAC committee? All right, fantastic. I think that that is pretty much it. For the area, we do have our parking lot established. So the plan will be that we will send out this revised copy to everyone. And we will request a specific date to have the individual FSCAC members provide their feedback for this. We will consolidate that feedback and send it back out to the FSCAC members prior to our next meeting. And we will be working towards establishing a meeting date for then. Any questions, issues, concerns about that process? Fantastic. We will now move to our public comment period for the meeting. So I would like to welcome anyone who would like to speak, to unmute themselves and share their comments. To our speakers, again, please note a timer will be displayed on the screen indicating your time remaining, and the alert will indicate that you're out of time. We are on the, we only have about 20 minutes left of the meeting, so please be respectful of the time. Each speaker is going to be allotted 3 minutes to make their comments. We will be interrupting if needed. Muted speakers who exceed 3 minutes will allow for people to speak. So speak succinctly and please be respectful of the time. Also note the public comments are not a forum for questions of FSCAC members. There will be no response from the FSCAC members. As a reminder, all public comments submitted by Wednesday, November 1st were presented to the committee members prior to this meeting. And please raise your hand if you would wish to provide comment, and I will call on you to unmute yourself in the order in which you raised your hand. I will now invite people to speak one at a time. Our first speaker is Gail Berkeley. Gail, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the time. I've been watching these proceedings and basically quiet on the sidelines. As we come to sort of the tail end of what you are doing now, my observation is that you're not really making top recommendations yet. You're sort of capturing thoughts and musings and suggestions. I would say you could distill this down into some very salient points. Key things that you need to be recommending. Reduce friction for sponsorship, right? Because that can take like a year for a CSP to arrange that. It's onerous for the agencies and the CSPs. Point 2 would be, let's look at getting to a bell curve of how long it takes an agency authorization to occur. There should be, 20% take 6 months, 20% take 12 months. Everything else should be targeting a bell curve at 8 months. And then you can work toward recommendations that would get you there. You also need to add maybe a recommendation for risk-based decision making. So a lot of these points scattered throughout. In my mind, you get to better risk-based decision makings at the agency for authorizations when there are more templates, more guidance, more training. I totally agree. The CRM is not necessarily keeping up, and that all the agencies need deployment guides as a key part of the agency authorization package. More standardization, more prescriptiveness, even where possible, about how best to accomplish some things. Third point there is reducing cost to market for CSPs while reducing the cost and manpower for agencies to authorize. We're back to the sponsorship situation again, and that it's hard for agencies to do this. It takes away from their mission. And while I embrace and love and want to be a leading adopter of OSCAL, I'm concerned if you add OSCAL to that mix, you're going to have fewer agencies willing to sponsor. In terms of the ConMon top 3, FedRAMP has already done some really great things, like now you only have to report, provided the agency concurs, those items that are late on your POAM rather than the 100 items you're tracking. Those are the kind of things that save time, make life simpler. In general, I think the government needs to begin to accept that SaaS is different from client server. There should be frequent change. There should be less friction to enhance security. There should be more consideration for operational requirements allowed based upon the use case, the application, the risk, how the application is used. And I think we need to really consider again, and we're talking a lot about an agency-wide GRC system. That's incredibly expensive. Last thing, I would move all references to OSCAL into the automation section and just be aware that it's only going to be able to automate parts of that package. You're not going to be able to OSCAL an authorization boundary diagram. That's really all I had to say. Thank you so much for letting me say it.
Great. Thank you so much, Gail. Do we have any other public speaking?
Hi, this is Mari Spina. Can I just add a little bit from MITRE Cyber? Yep. I was happy to hear you bring up the sort of the risk-based, threat-based analysis approach using GovCar. Very nice approach to that. And of course, being MITRE, I like to see it done. But one thing that I'd like to recommend that the committee consider at some point in the future is we're sort of fighting an asymmetric war because the attackers have teams of people and they're focused on our systems, you know, all day, trying to come up with ways to get to us. We don't really have the reciprocal team necessarily doing the same thing to help us to find our own vulnerabilities and to remediate those. We sort of stand back and wait. It happens, some event, some attack happens, and then we react. If we could do a little better to increase the intensity in our pen testing programs, I think FedRAMP did a good thing when they recommended the use of threat-based scenarios or advanced persistent threat scenarios in assessments. That's really good. I think there needs to be potentially education and understanding and tooling around how you do that kind of thing. The other thing is that a pen testing program that's rich and healthy and you know has a maintenance tail to it can better do this kind of thing on a regular routine basis. So there's no reason that at some point pen testing can't be considered part of continuous monitoring, right? So anyway, I just want to throw that out as an idea to maybe consider in the future, and I'm happy to talk more on it as well. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Right, great. Oh, Christine Biggs.
Yep. Hi there, Christine Biggs from Coalfire. I just wanted to go back to the automation section, to your goals, which I agree with all of them. I think there was one, though, person who spoke who did point out continuously that we should be focused on security, and I totally agree. So I would just say, take a look at those goals for automation, and I think that the primary driver of the automation, I know it's great for cost savings and ease of review for PMO reviewers, et cetera. But I think that if we don't use this opportunity and let it pass us by to use automation to really get a good visibility into the CSPs or the cloud service offerings security posture, that it would be an opportunity wasted. I know that we're focused a lot on compliance during these conversations, but automation is a great way to really give us that visibility into what is the security status in certain areas of a system. So I would say choose your tools wisely and focus on the things that can give the agencies the best view into the security posture of the system.
Right, great. Thank you so much, Christine. Any other public comments? All right, thank you so much. We are moving to our final topic of the agenda today, and that's going to be basically just closing remarks and adjournment. I do want to go over the plan thus far is to send out the revised document that we worked on today to all of the FSCAC members. From that, we will be collecting individual feedback from each member. I am going to ask that you return your individual feedback with changes by November 30th. Then the FSCAC support team will consolidate that feedback and send out a copy of that consolidated feedback to all FSCAC members prior to our next meeting to finalize this deliverable. Does anyone have any questions about the process? All right, great. Well, thank you guys again for joining us today. And with that, I will now adjourn this meeting at this time. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hmm.